Yo, what's going on, Headliner Nation? Breaking news in the NFL today. Aaron Jones sticking in Green Bay. What does that mean for Green Bay? What does it mean for the guys around him? Most importantly, what does it mean for your fantasy football teams in 2021? Kyle here with the Fantasy Headliners to give you my quick reactions to what this signing means. But before we jump into the video, we need to just bow our heads for a moment of silence for AJ Dillon truthers. And we're back. All right, listen up, okay? Aaron Jones re-signing with the Green Bay Packers is going to affect a lot of people around him and the free agent market as well. Aaron Jones was by far the biggest named running back on the free agent market, and no other team is even going to get the opportunity to talk to him. He sticks in Green Bay. It's a 4-year deal. It's $48 million, and he's going to be getting a $13 million signing bonus. Now, they did not tag him the other day, and when they didn't tag him, I said, okay, listen. I said, there's still a possibility that he could come back. Jamal Williams, there's still a possibility that they re-sign him. One of these guys is probably going to be with AJ Dillon next year, but who's it going to be? And the franchise tag is a lot less than what they were getting this deal done for anyway. So I'm kind of surprised that the deal ended up going through, but not completely surprised because the Green Bay Packers front office just seems to not know what in the world that they're doing. I mean, they're drafting backup quarterbacks for Aaron Rodgers and running backs who were the third string running back and will end up being the backup to Aaron Jones this year. That's what they did with last year's draft class. Aaron Jones is a special running back, though, okay? And he deserved this money. I just thought he was going to get it elsewhere. What about his 2020 stats, though? What about last season sticks out to me? 201 attempts, 1,104 rushing yards, still goes over 1,000 yards, which was great. 9 touchdowns on the ground. Added a little bit of work through the air as well. Added 47 receptions, 355 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. His yards per attempt was really the only thing that was up from his 2019 numbers, though. His yards per attempt in 2019 was 4.6. He goes all the way up to 5.5 last year. And he did miss a couple of games last year as well. His yards slightly up, gets about 30 more rushing yards than he had the year prior, but the touchdowns end up coming down, and that was a big reason why we were concerned about Aaron Jones last season and what it meant for his fantasy value. When you bring in a guy like AJ Dillon, you already have Jamal Williams on staff. You know, you have to assume that some of those red zone touches that Aaron Jones had the year prior gonna kind of go out the door. And last year, there was really 3 big games for Aaron Jones that led to a lot of his fantasy points. In week 2, he ran for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns. In week 13, he ran for 130 yards and a touchdown. And in week 15, he ran for 145 yards and a touchdown. So he didn't have any other 100-yard games other than that. In fact, he only had 2 games where he had 90 yards, and everything else was under 60. When you take a look at his under 70. When you take a look at his rushing yards from last season, 66 all the way up to 168, and then 69, 71, 15. Missed weeks 7 and 8, and then 58, 46, 41. Goes 90 and 130 in week 12 and week 13, back down to 69, goes 145, 94 and 15 and 16, goes 42 in week 17. So it was really an unbalanced performance from him last year, and that's a little bit of a concern for me. Now, some of that unbalanced, might be from Jamal Williams getting on the field as much as he did. The good news this year is there's not going to be 3 running backs in that room that are going to take touches, okay? So even though Aaron Jones, to me, at this point, screams high-end opportunity every time he touches the ball, hopefully some of that volume kind of reciprocates this year and comes back to him now that Jamal Williams won't end up being there so much. But what's it mean for A.J. Dillon? Well, A.J. Dillon is going to be the RB2 on that team. I still think he's going to see a lot of goal line touches. So those 9 rushing touchdowns that we saw from last season, I think that those are about what we see. The 16 from the year before was an awful lot. That ended up coming crashing down to that 9. I expect him to be right around that 9 to 11 mark, but A.J. Dillon is going to see more touches this season as the RB2. Is he going to have a ton of fantasy value? No, he's not, because Aaron Jones is going to get the high-end touches. Maybe you play A.J. Dillon like in some DFS lineups where you think maybe he's going to get some work towards the end of the game, some garbage time work, or he might see a lot of work in the red zone. That's where I expect him. I think a lot of Aaron Jones's touchdowns are going to come from outside the 10-yard line. I don't expect him to be touching the ball too much within the 10 to 5 to goal line touches, because they're going to be using A.J. Dillon in his huge frame for that. Some of the passing down work that Jamal Williams got, though, I expect to go to Aaron Jones, which I could see some of these receiving numbers going up. I could see some of these receptions, especially if they do not add another high-end wide receiver, okay? You've got Allen Lazard that you can end up bringing back. Devin Funchess is still there for another year. I know a lot of people forgot about Never Funchess last season, but he will end up being in Green Bay this year. Do they draft somebody? Do they try to bring in a free agent? You got MVS. If you don't really add anybody else, then those 47 receptions, the 355 receiving yards, those kind of bump up a little bit as well. I don't expect Jamal Williams back, and that's kind of how I've been talking basically this entire time anyway. I don't expect him back. If Green Bay pays Jamal Williams, it makes absolutely zero sense to me, and that makes the A.J. Dillon draft pick even worse in my mind. So I don't love that. However, anything can happen at this point. What does it mean for everyone around them, though? I mean, the offensive line is still going to need a little bit of work, okay? The offensive line is going to need to be boosted up a little bit. Do they take care of that in free agency? Do they take care of it in the draft? They're going to have to make some picks in the offensive line and get the offensive line back to where it was at one point in time. I mean, they're going to be needing to work on that defense a little bit as well. I mean, this is a defense last year that was good at times, but they got really shredded on the ground, and that kind of hurt Aaron Jones and some of his stats as well, because when you're getting shredded on the ground, the other team, number one, is keeping the ball with them more, keeping it out of your offense's hands more, and if there are teams that are putting up points on the ground as well, Aaron Jones is just going to throw it, Aaron Rodgers is just going to throw it more. Aaron Jones, again, missing out on some yards on the ground as well. So if that defense can get more stout and stop runners next year, then that means that there's a little bit more opportunity for a positive game script for the Packers and for Aaron Jones, and for Jones to run the ball a little bit more often. So kind of all of this being said, it brings a dynamic weapon back, and it really helps the passing game having Aaron Jones, because people have to key in on Aaron Jones. I think having Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon is a lot better for this offense than having A.J. Dillon and Jamal Williams. From the money standpoint, not so much, but just from the dynamics of the offense, I do like that combination a little bit better. But what do we think is going to happen with this? Aaron Jones, for me, it's going to probably be a low-end running back one. Again, some of those inconsistency things that we saw from last season in the numbers could still translate over to this year. I think it gets a little bit better. I think it evens out a little bit more. I don't think he's going to hit 2019 numbers, and I think we see a little bit more consistency than what we saw in 2020. So for me, I'm probably going to be drafting him in that anywhere from 7 to 10 running back range, somewhere in that area. We'll redo our rankings after free agency and the draft is all over with, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. That's where he's going to kind of fall for me at this point. More than likely, I'm going to be aiming for him in round 2. I know there's a lot of people that were trying to get their hands on him maybe in round 1, early round 2. I'm expecting to see him more in that mid to late RB or late to mid round 2 status for you to take as your RB1. For those of you that like to go running back heavy like I do, you go running back 1 in the first round, maybe grab like a Derrick Henry. Let's say that you draft towards maybe the mid to end of round 1. Maybe you can get Derrick Henry in round 1 and then offset some of those big consistencies that he has with a little bit more higher upside that what Aaron Jones will have on a weekly basis. You add those two things together, and now you've got 2 really good running backs, and then around 3 and 4, you start worrying about tight ends and wide receivers. That's a really good start to your draft. So that's kind of what I see all of this playing out like. I expect him to finish as probably a low-end running back 1. I expect him to be drafted anywhere from mid to late second round, maybe a little bit higher than that, but we'll see how free agency and the draft plays out as well. there you have it, Headliner Nation. Hopefully this breaking news is getting you ready for your fantasy football season here in 2021. Do me a favor, hit the like button down below if you appreciate that content. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. This is your first video. Become a part of Headliner Nation today and hit that subscribe button. And as always, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are about this. Do you think it was a good signing? Where do you think Aaron Jones lands in terms of running back status in fantasy football in 2021? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks everybody for tuning into this video. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.